There's some blue stuff on the canvas now. Light's going to come from behind this band of rock. So it's going to be really picked up here. This will be in the shade. And it's going to pick up on these rocks. And we're going to see it spill across the water here as well, fading off a little bit as we go off to the right. That's why I've washed it in more or less the way I have. Coming in here, we'll have deeper blues, a little darker, more in the shadow. And then as we get away from this little nook, this little alcove, this water will pick up more of the sky from the light, and it'll become lighter as we move to the right. I've laid in, varying bands of blues. I've used cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, a bit of burnt sienna, hints of burnt umber, hints of yellow ochre, and varying degrees of white. Mainly, to generally set in the values that I want for the water, minus 2 steps. 2 steps lower on the value scale kind of thing. Maybe 4 steps down on the value scale. Anyway, darker than it's going to be. But in relationship to each other, sort of similar to what it's going to end up as. And I also laid in the lines fairly straight because we're not having a really wavy alcove here. This little cul-de-sac for boats. It's going to be fairly calm. Might be a little rougher out there. Not really wavy, just more ripply, I suppose. Anyway, fairly calm day all around. And then I had this whole mass sitting here, and I needed to decide what to fill it with. And it's funny because it's very much in the foreground. It's very strong. The stones, the bedrock, the bedrock that's exposed is very large, and still it has to be subdued. It has to be present, it has to support the painting, but it has to be subdued so that it does not compete with any of this. There needs to be quite a bit, it occupies a lot of the painting, so obviously there needs to be some reasonable design in here. Many of these lines will disappear when I paint it. I've put in more than I need to, that's okay. Now when I paint it, well, first I'll wash it in, and I'll wash it in following those lines. But then when I go to paint it, I can be selective as to where the light and the dark sits. Some lines will be removed, some will not. I know this looks like some kind of an undersea creature. Maybe it's a biological UFO. Anyway, that's not going to stay like that. But I am wandering around here with some ultramarine blue, a little bit of burnt umber, and a little bit of white. And I'm getting rid of the white on the bottom of this canvas. Something I always enjoy doing. And it's kind of like labor, but I had to make sure that the rocks that were going to go in here were nice and plausible. This isn't, even though it's large and important, it still doesn't seem to occupy the same status of importance as the focal area does in the painting, so it's not quite as rewarding. And a lazy guy like me will often just kind of procrastinate doing it, which is dumb, because it has to be done. May as well just get at it. Just do the job. But, if there's some dumb stuff going on, I guarantee you I'll be involved. I had a comment. I can't remember who commented in the comments, but one of you guys were saying that when somebody comments on one of your paintings before it's finished, you just feel like throwing the whole painting in the trash. And to that, I can really only say, number one, consider the source of the comment. Is the person who's making the comment being diplomatic and gentle and constructive? Or are they just jealous of the fact that you're getting something done? Or trying to raise their own perceived status in their own mind at cost to you? And take heart, man. Be bold. Just ignore what other people say about it. You know, ask any artist who is prolific at all, any painter who does much of a body of work at all, and they will tell you that one of the most irritating things for them is to have people come along. I'm not just talking about YouTube comments, I'm talking about, you know, friends or family or whoever. It doesn't matter how well intentioned it is. But to have them come along and say, for example, there will be comments like, well, this is too plain, you know, there has to be more detail in the face of that cabin. It's not painted yet. You know, or this bit of rock here, it's not brown like these are. It's not painted yet. There are reasons for everything that's on there. And no viewer, no casual observer can possibly know what goes on in the mind of the painter, because everybody who paints something, if you're proficient with it, you will have a plan for what's coming up. And nobody but you, the painter, knows what that plan is. So, unless the painter is actually, the artist is asking you, what do you think, or any suggestions, unsolicited advice, unless of course you're joking, because there's a difference there too. But unsolicited advice is never welcome. Now, if you, you know, even when I've held workshops, and people are paying me to give them advice, I still try to be very gentle with my comments, because, you know, the art world is fraught with ego, and you don't want to sort of, you know, it's good to suggest things because that's what you're being paid for. It's also good to be mindful of people's feelings. People take what they do sometimes very personally. But yeah, just to say that whenever, even when I'm getting paid to direct or teach or suggest things, have to be careful, because you're there to be constructive. You're there to help other people be constructive and try to be encouraging to some degree. I've certainly had comments over the years, sometimes on my YouTube channel, but sometimes just in person from people who, this gets back to considering the source, from people who have no idea how to draw, let alone paint, create things. They have no imagination, but they're full of advice. I know of a guy here locally who, he and I went up to a place called Walleach Lake. Well, it's called Jones Lake as well. He'd never been up there, so he and I went up there. And we took his truck, because he wanted to drive his truck up. We got up to this beautiful spot. I hopped out of the truck, grabbed my camera, and thought, oh, I'll take a few snapshots. He sat in the truck patiently waiting for me. He didn't even look, he didn't even want to get out of the truck to look up, you know, because you can only see so much through your windshield and your windows of your vehicle. He didn't even get out of the truck to look around. So I bugged him. I gave him a hard time until he hopped out. And I said to him, look around, look at what we're surrounded by, look at the beauty here. No. Empty. When it came to the appreciation of that kind of beauty. But this same fellow has never hesitated to tell me how I should be doing things when I work on a painting. That guy hasn't been in my studio now for several years. Because I don't need that kind of hassle. Okay, anyway, whining and sniveling, whining and sniveling. Sorry guys, I'm such a crybaby. But I did want to address that comment because I know I've seen it happen to people too. This kind of thing, I've been around long enough that, you know, I don't want to call them trolls necessarily, but the people who often think they know better, they'll be that kind of person in life in general. They will always think they know better about pretty much everything. Usually it's the least qualified people who have the strongest opinions. And who offer them without request. So don't let that slow you down. Ignore it. Get your vision, stick to it, be brave with it, carry on. And when the whole thing's done, you will be ahead of the game instead of having been pushed around by somebody who had no idea. So here we are. We've got our shapes in. As I mentioned, now I'm using burnt umber, ultramarine blue to do the bulk of the rock. But I wiped it out here, but I'm going to continue a bit of bush here, a bit of grass, ground cover really, up through here to end here. In here, between these rocks, and over here. Now, these rocks, of course, I wanted the general shape of the foreshore to cradle our focal area, which it does. I think it does a good job of that so far, design-wise. But I didn't want all the lines to go parallel to these rocks. I like it if some things point towards our focal area. Okay? Area of interest. Let's just go for dead center for the sake of the argument for the moment. This rock, this line here will be quite strong. It heads off in this direction, okay? Kind of points at it. This line heads up in this direction, kind of points at it. Even this one goes into this area. The edge of this rock brings us up here. So it's kind of a balance between parallel and parallel to this area and pointing at it. And every line makes a difference. I'm not just randomly throwing rocks in. And we do this and we hope for the best. Talk to you soon.